Millionaire sees a homeless woman with her baby under heavy rain and immediately gives her one of his debit cards, telling her to use it wisely for a week. 15 days later, the police knock on his door. Robert Aldridge stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse office, gazing out at the Seattle skyline as rain pelted against the glass. The city lights twinkled through the downpour, creating a mesmerizing display that usually captivated him. But tonight, his mind was elsewhere. At 42, Robert had achieved more than most people could dream of in a lifetime. He'd built his tech company, Innovate Tech, from the ground up, turning it into a billion-dollar enterprise in just over a decade. His success story was the stuff of legend in the business world, often featured in magazines and motivational speeches. Running a hand through his salt and pepper hair, Robert sighed. Despite his wealth and achievements, a gnawing emptiness had taken root in his chest. He'd always believed that success would bring fulfillment, but lately he'd begun to question that assumption. "Mr. Aldridge?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your car is ready." "Thank you, Sarah," he replied, gathering his things. "I'll be down in a moment." As he rode the elevator down to the lobby, Robert's mind drifted to the charity gala he was attending that evening. Another night of schmoozing with Seattle's elite, sipping champagne and writing checks for causes he barely understood. It all felt so hollow. The sleek black sedan was waiting for him as he exited the building. His driver, Marcus, held an umbrella over Robert's head as he climbed into the back seat. "Evening, Mr. Aldridge," Marcus greeted him warmly. "Nasty weather we're having." Robert nodded, his eyes drawn to the rain-slicked streets. "It certainly is, Marcus. Let's hope it clears up soon." As they drove through downtown Seattle, Robert found himself studying the faces of people hurrying along the sidewalks. Umbrellas clutched tightly against the wind. He wondered about their lives, their struggles, their dreams. When was the last time he truly connected with someone outside his business circle? The car came to a stop at a red light, and that's when Robert saw her, a young woman huddled in the doorway of a closed shop, cradling something in her arms. As lightning illuminated the sky, he realized with a start that it was a baby. Without thinking, Robert called out, "Marcus, pull over!" The driver complied, guiding the car to the curb. Robert was out the door before Marcus could grab an umbrella, the rain immediately soaking through his expensive suit. As he approached the woman, her eyes widened with a mix of fear and wariness. She clutched the baby closer to her chest, ready to bolt at any moment. "It's okay," Robert said, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you. Are you all right? Do you need help?" The woman hesitated, her gaze darting between Robert and the idling car behind him. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible above the rain. We're okay. Just waiting for the rain to let up a bit." Robert's heart clenched as he took in her appearance. She couldn't have been more than 25, with long, tangled brown hair plastered to her face by the rain. Her clothes were worn and ill-fitting, and the baby in her arms was wrapped in what looked like an old sweater. In that moment, something shifted inside Robert. All the wealth he'd accumulated, all the accolades he'd received, none of it mattered in the face of this raw human struggle before him. Without hesitation, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He extracted a debit card, not his main one, but one linked to a substantial account nonetheless. "Here," he said, holding out the card to the woman. "Take this. Use it for whatever you need. Food, shelter, clothes for you and your baby. Just use it wisely, okay? It's good for a week." The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. I can't take this," she stammered. "It's too much." Robert shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "Please, I insist. Consider it a gift from a stranger who's been more fortunate than most." With trembling hands, the woman accepted the card. "Thank you," she whispered, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks. "I'm Julie. This means more than you know." "I'm Robert," he replied, suddenly feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the weather. Take care of yourself and your little one, Julie." As he turned to go, Julie called out, "Wait! How will I return it to you?" Robert paused, looking back over his shoulder. "Don't worry about that. Just pay it forward when you can." As he climbed back into the car, soaked to the bone but feeling more alive than he had in years, Robert knew that something fundamental had changed. He'd spent so long chasing success, he'd forgotten what it meant to make a real difference in someone's life. "Everything okay, Mr. Aldridge?" Marcus asked, concern evident in his voice. Robert nodded, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Yes, Marcus. For the first time in a long while, I think it is." Julie stood frozen in the doorway, the debit card clutched tightly in her hand as she watched the sleek black car disappear into the rainy night. The weight of her sleeping baby, Tommy, in her arms grounded her, reminding her that this wasn't a dream. "Did that really just happen?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the patter of rain. Looking down at the card, Julie felt a mix of hope and trepidation wash over her. It had been so long since anyone had shown her kindness without expecting something in return. The man, Robert, had given her this lifeline without hesitation, without judgment. It was almost too good to be true. As another gust of wind drove the rain sideways, Julie made a decision. She couldn't stay in this doorway all night. With renewed determination, she adjusted Tommy in her arms and stepped out into the storm. The nearest 24-hour supermarket was a few blocks away. Julie walked briskly, using her body to shield Tommy from the worst of the rain. Her mind raced with possibilities: food, diapers, maybe even a cheap motel room for a night or two. The thought of a warm, dry place to sleep made her quicken her pace. The bright fluorescent lights of the supermarket were almost blinding after the dim streets. Julie blinked, taking in the sight of well-stocked shelves and the handful of late-night shoppers. She felt suddenly self-conscious, acutely aware of her bedraggled appearance. Grabbing a cart, Julie carefully placed Tommy in the seat. He stirred slightly, but didn't wake, his little face peaceful in sleep. She allowed herself a moment to smooth his damp hair, marveling at how he could sleep through anything. "Okay, Tommy," she murmured. "Let's make this count." Julie moved through the aisles methodically, selecting essentials with care: diapers, formula, baby food, bread, peanut butter, canned goods. She even allowed herself a few fresh fruits and vegetables, items that had been luxuries for far too long. As she turned into the toiletries aisle, a familiar voice called out, "Julie? Is that you?" She froze, her heart racing. Turning slowly, she came face to face with a ghost from her past. "Paul?" she gasped. Paul Henderson stood before her, a basket of groceries in hand and a look of shock on his face. They had been close friends in high school, inseparable until life had taken them in different directions after graduation. "My God, Julie," Paul said, his eyes taking in her appearance and the baby in the cart. "What happened to you?" Julie felt a lump form in her throat. How could she explain the series of misfortunes that had led her here? The lost job, the mounting debts, the eviction. It all seemed too much to put into words. It's a long story," she managed, fighting back tears. Paul's expression softened. He set down his basket and stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "Hey, it's okay. You don't have to explain anything right now." Tommy chose that moment to wake up, his face scrunching up as he prepared to cry. Julie quickly scooped him up, bouncing him gently. "Is this your son?" Paul asked, his voice filled with wonder. Julie nodded, a small smile breaking through her worry. "This is Tommy. He's 6 months old." Paul watched as she soothed the baby, a mix of emotions playing across his face. Finally, he seemed to come to a decision. "Listen, Julie," he said, his tone serious. "I don't know what's going on, but I can't just walk away and leave you like this. I have a spare room in my apartment. Why don't you come stay with me for a while? Just until you can get back on your feet." Julie stared at him, stunned by the offer. Part of her wanted to refuse, to maintain what little independence she had left. But as she looked down at Tommy, now contentedly chewing on her shirt collar. She knew she had to put his needs first. "Are you sure?" she asked hesitantly. "I don't want to be a burden." Paul shook his head firmly. "You could never be a burden, Jules. We were best friends once, remember? Let me help you now." Tears welled up in Julie's eyes, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Paul. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "Don't worry about that," he said with a warm smile. "Let's finish your shopping, and then we'll head home. You look like you could use a hot shower and a good night's sleep." As they made their way through the rest of the store, Julie felt a glimmer of hope she hadn't experienced in months. She still had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely alone. Little did she know that this chance encounter, born from an act of kindness by a stranger, would set in motion a chain of events that would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. The following days passed in a blur for Julie. After that fateful night at the supermarket, she found herself settling into Paul's spare room, a cozy space that felt like a palace compared to the streets she'd been calling home. The simple luxury of a warm bed and a roof over her head brought tears to her eyes each night as she laid Tommy down to sleep. Paul had been true to his word, giving Julie and Tommy the space and time they needed to adjust. He was often out during the day, working at his job as a software developer, but in the evenings, they would share meals and catch up on the years they'd missed. On the third evening, as Julie sat on the living room couch, gently rocking Tommy to sleep, Paul approached with 2 steaming mugs of tea. "Hey," he said softly, setting the mugs on the coffee table. "I thought you might like some chamomile. It always helps me relax." Julie smiled gratefully. "Thanks, Paul, for everything. I don't know where we'd be without you." Paul settled into an armchair across from her, his expression thoughtful. "Jules, you don't have to tell me if you're not ready, but what happened? Last I heard, you were heading off to college with big dreams." Julie sighed, her eyes fixed on Tommy's peaceful face. "Life, I guess. I did go to college for a while, but then my mom got sick. I dropped out to take care of her, and after she passed..." She trailed off, swallowing hard. "Things just spiraled from there. Bad choices, worse luck. Before I knew it, I was pregnant and alone." Paul leaned forward, his face etched with concern. "I'm so sorry, Jules. I wish I'd known. I would have been there for you." "It's not your fault," Julie assured him. "I pushed everyone away. I was too proud to ask for help, and by the time I realized how bad things had gotten, it felt like it was too late." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the only sound the soft breathing of the sleeping baby. "So," Paul finally said, a hint of curiosity in his voice, "what's the story with the debit card? You mentioned a stranger gave it to you?" Julie nodded, reaching into her pocket to pull out the card. She'd been using it sparingly, afraid that at any moment it might be cut off, or that the whole thing would turn out to be some cruel joke. "It was the night we ran into each other," she explained. "This man, Robert, he just gave it to me, told me to use it wisely for a week. I still can't believe it." Paul's eyebrows shot up. "Wow, that's incredible. Have you used it much?" "Just for essentials," Julie said. "Diapers, formula, some clothes for Tommy. I'm trying to make it last, you know? I don't want to take advantage." Paul nodded approvingly. "That's smart. But Jules, you should use it while you can. Get yourself some things too. You deserve it after everything you've been through." Julie hesitated, torn between her ingrained frugality and the temptation to indulge, just a little. "Maybe you're right. I could use some new clothes for job interviews." "That's the spirit," Paul encouraged. "In fact, why don't we go shopping tomorrow? I have the day off, and I'd be happy to watch Tommy while you try things on." The idea of a day out, of doing something as normal as shopping, brought a genuine smile to Julie's face. "That sounds wonderful, Paul. Thank you." As they continued to chat, Julie felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the tea. For the first time in years, she felt like she had a friend, someone who cared about her and Tommy without judgment. Later that night, as Julie lay in bed, her mind wandered to Robert, the mysterious benefactor who had set this chain of events in motion. She wondered what he was doing now, if he ever thought about the woman and baby he'd helped that rainy night. Little did she know that across town, Robert was indeed thinking of her, hoping that his small act of kindness had made a difference. As sleep began to claim her, Julie made a silent promise to herself. She would use this opportunity to turn her life around, to build a better future for Tommy. And someday, somehow, she would find a way to thank Robert and pay forward the kindness he had shown her. With renewed hope in her heart and plans for the future taking shape in her mind, Julie drifted off to sleep, unaware of the challenges and surprises that still lay ahead. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a welcome change from the recent dreary weather. Julie woke to the sound of Tommy's soft coos, a smile spreading across her face as she gazed at her son. The prospect of a day out shopping filled her with a mix of excitement and nervousness. After feeding Tommy and getting him dressed, Julie emerged from the spare room to find Paul in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. "Morning, Jules," he greeted cheerfully. "I made pancakes. Thought we could use a good meal before our shopping adventure." Julie's stomach rumbled in response. "That sounds amazing. I can't remember the last time I had pancakes." As they sat down to eat, Paul outlined his plan for the day. "I was thinking we could start at the mall. They have a good mix of stores, and there's a play area where I can watch Tommy while you shop." Julie nodded, grateful for his thoughtfulness. "That sounds perfect. I just hope I remember how to shop for myself," she added with a self-deprecating laugh. Paul reached across the table, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "You'll do great. And hey, if you need a second opinion, I'm your man." An hour later, they were walking through the mall, Tommy securely strapped to Paul's chest in a borrowed baby carrier. Julie couldn't help but feel a bit overwhelmed by the bustling crowds and bright storefronts. It had been so long since she'd been in a place like this. "Okay," Paul said, coming to a stop near the play area. "Why don't you start looking around? Take your time, try things on. Tommy and I will be right here when you're done." Julie hesitated, her hand instinctively reaching for her son. Paul noticed her reluctance and smiled gently. "He'll be fine, Jules. I promise. This is your time. Enjoy it." Taking a deep breath, Julie nodded. "You're right. Okay, I'll be back soon." As she walked away, Julie glanced back to see Paul already entertaining Tommy, making silly faces that had the baby giggling. The sight warmed her heart and gave her the courage to continue. Julie spent the next couple of hours exploring the stores, trying on clothes she would have never dared to consider before. She found herself drawn to professional-looking blouses and slacks, imagining wearing them to job interviews or maybe even an office job someday. In one store, a kind sales associate helped her find a simple but elegant black dress. As Julie looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. For the first time in years, she felt pretty. With each purchase, Julie felt a little more of her old confidence returning. She was careful with the money, always checking prices and looking for sales, but she allowed herself to enjoy the experience. As she was leaving her final store, a display in a nearby shop window caught her eye. It was a delicate silver locket, heart-shaped and engraved with intricate patterns. Julie found herself drawn to it, imagining placing a tiny photo of Tommy inside. Before she could talk herself out of it, Julie entered the store and asked to see the locket. The price was higher than she'd planned to spend on herself, but as she held the necklace in her hand, she knew it was something she'd treasure forever. With a mix of guilt and excitement, Julie made her final purchase of the day. As the cashier handed her the small, elegantly wrapped box, Julie felt a surge of emotion. This wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a symbol of hope, a reminder that better days were ahead. Returning to the play area, Julie found Paul and Tommy right where she'd left them. Tommy was fast asleep in the carrier, and Paul was scrolling through his phone. "Hey," she said softly, not wanting to wake Tommy. "Sorry that took so long." Paul looked up with a smile. "No worries. We had a great time. Did you find everything you needed?" Julie nodded, holding up her shopping bags. "I think so. Thank you, Paul, for everything." As they walked back to the car, Julie felt a newfound lightness in her step. The day had been more than just a shopping trip. It had been a step towards reclaiming her life, her identity. Back at Paul's apartment, as Julie carefully hung up her new clothes and placed the locket box on her nightstand, she allowed herself to imagine a future where days like this were the norm. A future where she could provide for Tommy, where they had a place of their own, where she no longer had to rely on the kindness of strangers or old friends. With renewed determination, Julie made a promise to herself. She would make the most of this opportunity for herself and for Tommy. The road ahead might be challenging, but for the first time in a long time, Julie felt ready to face whatever came her way. As the week progressed, Julie settled into a comfortable routine at Paul's apartment. She spent her days caring for Tommy, searching for job opportunities online, and working on her resume. The debit card Robert had given her was still active, and she continued to use it sparingly for necessities. One evening, as Paul returned from work, he found Julie at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and looking frustrated. "Everything okay?" he asked, setting down his laptop bag. Julie sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm just trying to figure out my next steps. I've been applying for jobs, but without recent experience or references, it's been tough." Paul nodded sympathetically. "I can imagine. Have you thought about taking any courses to update your skills?" Julie's eyes lit up. "I hadn't considered that. Do you think it would help?" "Definitely," Paul replied, pulling up a chair. "There are lots of online courses these days. Some are even free. Why don't we take a look?" For the next hour, they explored various online learning platforms. Julie found herself drawn to courses in office administration and basic accounting, fields she thought might offer stable employment. "These look great," she said, excitement creeping into her voice. "But I'm not sure how I'll manage with Tommy." Paul hesitated for a moment before speaking. "You know, I've been thinking. My company is always looking for interns. It's entry-level stuff, but it could be a foot in the door. And I could watch Tommy while you work." Julie stared at him, overwhelmed by the offer. "Paul, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking, I'm offering," he said firmly. "Jules, you're my friend. I want to help." Tears welled up in Julie's eyes. "I don't know what to say. Thank you. Doesn't seem enough." Paul smiled, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "Just promise me you'll kick butt at the internship if you get it." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Julie threw herself into preparing for the internship opportunity, taking online courses in the evenings after Tommy was asleep. Paul helped her update her resume and coached her on interview techniques. On the morning of her interview, Julie stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her new blouse nervously. She wore the silver locket around her neck, touching it for reassurance. "You've got this, Jules," Paul said, appearing in the doorway with Tommy in his arms. "Remember, just be yourself." Julie nodded, taking a deep breath. She kissed Tommy's forehead and headed out, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. The interview went better than she could have hoped. The hiring manager, a kind woman named Sarah, seemed impressed by Julie's eagerness to learn and her recent online coursework. As Julie left the office building, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Back at the apartment, Paul was waiting anxiously. "How did it go?" he asked as soon as she walked in. Julie broke into a wide smile. "I think it went well. Really well, actually. They said they'd be in touch soon." Paul whooped, pulling her into a celebratory hug. "I knew you could do it." As they broke apart, Julie suddenly realized how close they were standing. There was a moment of tension, an unspoken question hanging in the air between them. But before either could act on it, Tommy's cry broke the silence. Julie stepped back, her cheeks flushing. "I should go check on him," she said quickly, hurrying to the spare room. As she tended to Tommy, Julie's mind raced. What had just happened? Was she imagining things? Or was there something developing between her and Paul? The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Later that night, as Julie lay in bed, she found herself thinking about Robert again. The week he had given her to use the card was almost up. She wondered if she should try to find him, to thank him for the opportunity he had given her. But how? With a start, Julie realized she had never checked the name on the card. Reaching for her purse, she pulled out the debit card and squinted at the name embossed on it, Robert Aldridge. A quick internet search revealed that Robert Aldridge was the CEO of Innovate Tech, a major tech company in Seattle. Julie's heart raced as she realized the magnitude of what he had done for her. As she drifted off to sleep, Julie made a decision. Once she heard back about the internship, she would find a way to contact Robert. She needed to thank him, to let him know how his act of kindness had changed her life. Little did she know that events were already in motion that would bring her face to face with Robert sooner than she expected, under circumstances neither of them could have anticipated. The next morning, Julie woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. Heart racing, she answered the call to hear Sarah's voice on the other end. The news was better than she could have hoped. She'd gotten the internship, and they wanted her to start the following week. Elated, Julie rushed to share the news with Paul. She found him in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for Tommy. "Paul, I got it! I got the internship!" she exclaimed, her face beaming with joy. Paul's face lit up. "That's fantastic, Jules. I knew you could do it." He pulled her into a celebratory hug, careful not to disturb Tommy in his high chair. As they broke apart, that same tension from the previous day flickered between them. This time, however, Julie pushed it aside, focusing on the excitement of her new opportunity. "I start next Monday," she said, running a hand through her hair. "There's so much to prepare. I'll need to figure out childcare for Tommy, and—" Paul cut her off gently. "Hey, remember what I said? I can watch Tommy while you're at work. My schedule is flexible, and I can work from home most days." Julie hesitated. "Are you sure? It's a big responsibility, and I don't want to take advantage of your kindness." "I'm positive," Paul assured her. "This is your chance, Jules. Let me help you make the most of it." Overwhelmed with gratitude, Julie nodded, tears pricking at her eyes. "Thank you, Paul. I don't know how I'll ever repay you for everything you've done." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Julie spent hours researching the company, practicing her computer skills, and preparing herself mentally for the challenge ahead. Paul was a constant source of support, offering encouragement and practical help in equal measure. On Sunday evening, the night before her first day, Julie stood in front of her closet, agonizing over what to wear. Paul knocked softly on the open door. "How's it going in here?" he asked, taking in the pile of clothes on the bed. Julie sighed. "I'm just nervous, I guess. It's been so long since I've been in a professional environment. What if I'm not ready?" Paul stepped into the room, his expression serious. "Julie, listen to me. You are more than ready for this. You're smart, you're determined, and you've worked incredibly hard to get here. They'd be lucky to have you." His words washed over her, calming her nerves. "You really think so?" "I know so," Paul said firmly. Then with a mischievous glint in his eye, he added, "Now, let's pick out an outfit that says, 'I'm here to conquer the business world and look fabulous doing it.'" Julie laughed, the tension breaking. Together, they selected a smart blouse and tailored pants, paired with the simple black heels she'd bought on their shopping trip. As Paul turned to leave, Julie caught his arm. "Paul, wait. I just wanted to say thank you for everything. I don't know where Tommy and I would be without you." Paul's expression softened. "You don't have to thank me, Jules. I'm just glad I could help." For a moment they stood there, the air between them charged with unspoken emotions. Then slowly, Paul leaned in. Julie's heart raced as their lips met in a soft, tentative kiss. When they pulled apart, both were slightly breathless. "I've wanted to do that for a while now," Paul admitted, a shy smile on his face. Julie felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Paul, I care about you too, but this is all happening so fast. With the new job and Tommy, I'm not sure I'm ready for a relationship right now." Paul nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I get it, Jules. There's no pressure. We can take things slow, see where they go. For now, let's focus on your big day tomorrow." Grateful for his understanding, Julie gave him a quick hug before he left the room. As she finished preparing for bed, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Excitement for her new job, confusion about her feelings for Paul, and an underlying current of gratitude for how much her life had changed in just a week. As she lay in bed that night, Julie's hand went to the locket around her neck. She thought of Robert Aldridge, the stranger whose kindness had set all of this in motion. She made a mental note to find a way to thank him properly once she was settled in her new job. Little did she know that fate had other plans, and her path would cross with Robert's much sooner than she anticipated, in a way that would change both their lives forever. Julie's first week at her new internship flew by in a whirlwind of new faces, information, and challenges. Each evening, she'd return home exhausted but exhilarated, eager to share her experiences with Paul and spend time with Tommy. The routine they'd fallen into felt comfortable, almost domestic, and Julie found herself growing increasingly conflicted about her feelings for Paul. On Friday afternoon, as Julie was wrapping up her work, her supervisor approached her desk. "Julie, I have to say, I'm impressed with how quickly you're picking things up," Sarah said with a warm smile. "We have a company event next week, a charity gala. Would you be interested in helping out? It would be a great networking opportunity." Julie's heart leapt at the chance. "Absolutely, I'd love to help. What would I need to do?" Sarah explained that Julie would be assisting with guest registration and helping to coordinate some of the event logistics. "It's next Thursday evening. I know it's short notice, but we'd love to have you there." As Julie left the office that evening, her mind was already racing with preparations. She'd need a suitable dress, and she'd have to ask Paul if he could watch Tommy for a few extra hours. When she arrived home, she found Paul and Tommy in the living room, engrossed in a picture book. The sight made her heart swell with affection. "Hey, you two," she said, dropping her bag and joining them on the couch. "How was your day?" Paul looked up with a smile that made her pulse quicken. "It was great. Tommy and I had a little adventure in the park. How about you? You look excited." Julie filled him in on the gala invitation, her enthusiasm evident in her voice. "It's such a great opportunity, Paul, but I hate to ask you to watch Tommy for even longer." Paul shook his head, cutting off her concerns. "Jules, it's no problem at all. Tommy and I are buddies now, aren't we, little man?" He tickled Tommy's tummy, eliciting a burst of giggles. "Thank you," Julie said softly, touched by his unwavering support. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them crackled with tension. Julie found herself leaning in slightly, drawn by an invisible force. But before anything could happen, Tommy let out a loud squeal, breaking the moment. Clearing her throat, Julie stood up. "I should start dinner, and I need to figure out what to wear to this gala." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Julie threw herself into her work, determined to impress at the gala. In the evenings, she and Paul would discuss her day over dinner, their conversations flowing easily, punctuated by Tommy's babbling. On Wednesday night, as Julie was trying on dresses, she realized with a start that she still had Robert Aldridge's debit card. The week he'd given her had long since passed, but she'd been so caught up in her new life that she'd forgotten to return it. Guilt washed over her. She needed to find a way to contact him, to thank him and return the card. An idea struck her. Maybe she could ask Sarah if Innovate Tech had any connections to Robert's company. It was a long shot, but worth trying. Thursday evening arrived, and Julie stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down her dress nervously. She'd chosen a simple but elegant black dress. the one she'd bought on her shopping trip with Paul. The silver locket hung around her neck, a reminder of how far she'd come. Paul appeared in the doorway, Tommy in his arms. "Wow," he breathed. "Jules, you look amazing." Julie blushed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thanks. I'm so nervous. What if I mess something up?" Paul crossed the room, shifting Tommy to one arm so he could place a reassuring hand on Julie's shoulder. "You're going to do great. Just be yourself. That's more than enough." Impulsively, Julie leaned in and kissed Paul's cheek. "Thank you for everything." As she headed out the door, Julie felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This gala could be a turning point in her career, a chance to prove herself. She had no way of knowing that it would also be the night that would bring her face to face with Robert Aldridge once again, under circumstances neither of them could have anticipated. Little did Julie know that as she made her way to the event venue, Robert was also preparing for the gala, unaware that the woman he'd helped on that rainy night would soon re-enter his life, setting in motion a series of events that would change both their lives forever. The grand ballroom of the Seattle Art Museum was abuzz with activity as Julie arrived. Glittering chandeliers cast a warm glow over the elegantly dressed guests, and the soft strains of a string quartet filled the air. Julie took a deep breath, smoothing her dress one last time before approaching the registration table. "Julie, you made it," Sarah greeted her with a smile. "You look lovely. Are you ready to jump in?" Julie nodded, her nervousness giving way to determination. "Absolutely. What do you need me to do?" For the next hour, Julie threw herself into her tasks, greeting guests, managing the guest list, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. She was so focused on her work that she barely had time to feel out of place among the city's elite. As the evening wore on, Julie found herself with a moment to breathe. She stepped back, taking in the scene before her. The room was filled with Seattle's most influential people, all gathered to support various charitable causes. Suddenly, a familiar face caught her eye across the room. Julie's heart skipped a beat as she realized who it was: Robert Aldridge, the man who had changed her life with a simple act of kindness. He was engaged in conversation with a group of people, looking every bit the successful CEO in his tailored tuxedo. Julie's mind raced. Should she approach him? What would she say? Before she could decide, Sarah appeared at her elbow. "Julie, I need your help. One of our major donors has arrived, and I'd like you to escort him to his table." Nodding, Julie followed Sarah through the crowd. As they approached a small group of people, Julie's breath caught in her throat. Standing at the center of the group was Robert Aldridge. "Mr. Aldridge," Sarah said warmly, "thank you so much for coming. This is Julie, one of our bright new interns. She'll show you to your table." Robert turned, his eyes widening slightly as they met Julie's. For a moment, neither spoke, the recognition hanging in the air between them. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Aldridge," Julie managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your seat." As they walked through the ballroom, Julie could feel Robert's eyes on her. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "I remember you from that rainy night. How are you? And your baby?" Julie's heart swelled with gratitude. "We're doing well, thanks to you. Mr. Aldridge, I can't begin to thank you for what you did for us. You changed our lives." They reached the table, and Robert gestured for Julie to sit. "Please, join me for a moment. I'd love to hear what happened." For the next few minutes, Julie gave Robert a brief overview of the past weeks, finding a place to stay, getting the internship, starting to rebuild her life. Robert listened intently, his expression a mix of surprise and genuine pleasure. "I'm so glad to hear things have worked out for you," he said warmly. "But please call me Robert, and I hope you know that what you've accomplished is your own doing. I just provided a small opportunity. You're the one who made the most of it." Julie shook her head, touched by his modesty. "It was more than small, Robert. You gave us hope when we needed it most. I've been wanting to find a way to thank you properly, and to return your card." Robert waved off her concern about the card. "Keep it. Consider it a gift. But if you really want to thank me, promise me you'll continue on this path. Work hard, build a good life for yourself and your child. That's all the thanks I need." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of shattering glass, followed by a commotion near the entrance to the ballroom. Julie turned to see a man stumbling through the crowd, his movements erratic and aggressive. "I need to see what's going on," Julie said, standing quickly. "Please excuse me, Robert." As she made her way towards the disturbance, Julie could hear raised voices. The man was becoming increasingly agitated, shouting about injustice and corporate greed. Security guards were moving in, but the situation was escalating quickly. Julie's heart raced as she realized the man was heading straight for Robert's table. Without thinking, she stepped into his path, her voice calm but firm. "Sir, I need you to come with me. Let's talk about this outside." The man's wild eyes focused on her, and for a moment Julie feared she'd made a terrible mistake. But something in her steady gaze seemed to reach him. His shoulders slumped, and he allowed Julie to guide him towards the exit. As security took over, Julie turned to see Robert watching her, an expression of admiration on his face. She realized, with a mix of pride and surprise, that she just handled a potentially dangerous situation with a composure she didn't know she possessed. Little did Julie know that this incident would set in motion a series of events that would not only change her career trajectory, but also deepen her connection with Robert in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The aftermath of the incident at the gala unfolded rapidly. Security escorted the agitated man out of the building, while Julie found herself surrounded by concerned guests and colleagues, all praising her quick thinking and calm demeanor. Sarah rushed over, her face a mix of relief and amazement. "Julie, that was incredible. Are you all right?" Julie nodded, still processing what had just happened. "I'm fine. I just reacted, I guess." Before Sarah could respond, Robert Aldridge appeared at Julie's side. "That was very brave of you," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "Not many people would have handled that situation so well." Julie felt a blush creeping up her cheeks. "Thank you, Robert. I'm just glad no one was hurt." As the excitement died down and the gala resumed its normal flow, Robert turned to Julie with a thoughtful expression. "Julie, I'd like to speak with you further. Would you be available for a meeting next week?" Surprised but intrigued, Julie agreed. They exchanged contact information, and Robert promised to have his assistant set up the meeting. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. By the time Julie arrived home, she was exhausted but exhilarated. She found Paul dozing on the couch, Tommy sleeping peacefully in his portable crib nearby. Paul stirred as she entered, blinking sleepily. "Hey, you're back. How was it?" Julie sat down next to him, kicking off her heels with a sigh of relief. "It was eventful," she said, before launching into a detailed account of the evening's events. Paul listened with wide eyes, his expression shifting from concern to pride. "Wow, Jules, that's incredible. You really handled that like a pro." As they talked, Julie felt a wave of affection for Paul. His unwavering support and the comfortable domesticity they'd fallen into over the past weeks stirred something in her heart. Without overthinking it, she leaned in and kissed him softly. When they pulled apart, Paul's eyes were shining. "What was that for?" he asked, a smile playing on his lips. Julie shrugged, suddenly feeling shy. "For being you, for everything you've done for us. I think I'm ready to see where this could go. If you are." Paul's response was to pull her into another kiss, this one deeper and full of promise. The next week flew by in a whirlwind of work and stolen moments with Paul. Julie threw herself into her internship with renewed vigor, impressing her colleagues with her dedication and quick learning. Finally, the day of her meeting with Robert arrived. Julie dressed carefully in one of her new business outfits, the silver locket a comforting weight around her neck. As she entered the imposing Innovate Tech building, Julie felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. Robert's assistant greeted her warmly and led her to a spacious corner office with breathtaking views of the Seattle skyline. Robert rose from behind his desk as she entered, greeting her with a warm smile. "Julie, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." As they settled into comfortable chairs, Robert got straight to the point. "I've been thinking a lot about your situation since the gala," he began. "Your quick thinking and composure that night impressed me greatly. It made me realize that talent can be found in unexpected places." Julie listened intently, her heart racing with anticipation. Robert continued, "I've spoken with your supervisors, and they can't stop singing your praises. Your work ethic, your ability to learn quickly, your interpersonal skills, these are all qualities we value highly at Innovate Tech." He paused, leaning forward slightly. "Julie, I'd like to offer you a position here at Innovate Tech. It would be an entry-level role in our community outreach department with opportunities for advancement based on your performance. We'd also provide additional training to help you develop your skills further." Julie sat in stunned silence for a moment, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. I don't know what to say," she finally managed. "This is incredible, Robert. But why me?" Robert's expression softened. "Because I believe in giving people chances, Julie. That night in the rain, I saw someone who needed an opportunity. Now I see someone who's proven she can make the most of that opportunity. You've shown resilience, determination, and a genuine desire to improve your life. Those are qualities I want in my company." Tears pricked at Julie's eyes as the full impact of Robert's offer sank in. This wasn't just a job, it was a chance at a real career, a way to provide a stable future for Tommy. "Thank you, Robert," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I promise, if you give me this chance, I'll work harder than anyone to prove you made the right choice." As they discussed the details of the position, Julie felt a sense of wonder wash over her. From a desperate night in the rain to this moment, her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. As she left Robert's office, clutching the formal job offer, Julie knew that this was more than just a new beginning for her. It was a chance to build the life she'd always dreamed of for herself and Tommy, and to pay forward the kindness that had changed everything. Little did she know that this was just the beginning of a journey that would not only transform her own life, but also touch the lives of many others in unexpected ways. 2 years had passed since that fateful rainy night, and Julie stood at the podium addressing a room full of eager faces. The annual Innovate Tech Charity Gala had become her favorite event of the year, a reminder of how far she'd come. "When I first encountered Innovate Tech, I was a homeless mother with a baby, desperate for a chance," Julie began, her voice steady and confident. "Today, I stand before you as the head of our company's new Second Chance initiative, a program dedicated to helping those who need just one opportunity to turn their lives around." In the audience, Robert Aldridge beamed with pride. His impulsive act of kindness had sparked a transformation not just in Julie's life, but in the very culture of his company. The Second Chance initiative had become Innovate Tech's flagship charitable program, providing job training, mentorship, and employment opportunities to those struggling to get back on their feet. As Julie continued her speech, she caught sight of Paul in the crowd, bouncing a now-toddler Tommy on his knee. Her heart swelled with love for her little family. She and Paul had married 6 months ago in a small, joyful ceremony, with Robert proudly walking her down the aisle. "Our initiative has already helped over 100 individuals find stable employment and rebuild their lives," Julie announced, to enthusiastic applause. "But we're just getting started. Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce that Innovate Tech is expanding the program nationwide." The room erupted in cheers, and Julie saw Robert rise to his feet, leading a standing ovation. As she stepped down from the podium, Robert embraced her warmly. "You've done more than I ever could have imagined, Julie," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've changed the lives of so many people." Julie shook her head, smiling. "We've changed lives, Robert. None of this would have been possible without your initial leap of faith." As the gala wound down, Julie found a quiet moment with Paul and Tommy. She knelt down to her son's level, straightening his little bow tie. "What do you think, sweetie? Did Mommy do okay?" Tommy nodded enthusiastically. "You were awesome, Mommy. Can we get ice cream now?" Julie and Paul laughed, the sound mingling with the soft music still playing in the background. "Ice cream sounds perfect," Paul said, scooping Tommy up. "I think we all deserve a celebration." As they made their way out of the ballroom, Julie paused for a moment, taking in the scene. She thought back to that desperate night in the rain, how close she'd come to giving up hope. Now she was not only thriving, but helping others find their own paths to success. The silver locket still hung around her neck, a constant reminder of her journey. Inside, she'd placed a tiny photo of Tommy on one side and a picture of her, Paul, and Robert on the other. Her old life and new life, perfectly balanced. Outside, the Seattle night was clear and crisp. As they walked towards their car, Julie spotted a young woman huddled in a doorway, a small child clutched to her chest. Without hesitation, Julie approached her, Paul following close behind. "Excuse me," Julie said softly. "Are you all right? Do you need any help?" The woman looked up, fear and desperation etched on her face, a look Julie recognized all too well. In that moment, Julie knew exactly what to do. Reaching into her purse, she pulled out a business card and handed it to the woman. "I know things seem hopeless right now, but they can get better. Call this number tomorrow. We have a program that might be able to help you." As they drove home, Tommy already fast asleep in his car seat, Paul reached over and squeezed Julie's hand. "You never cease to amaze me," he said softly. Julie smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She had come full circle, from receiving a lifeline to offering one to others. The journey hadn't been easy, but every step had led her to this moment, surrounded by love, purpose, and the opportunity to make a difference. As they pulled up to their home, a modest but comfortable house they'd bought last year, Julie knew that her story was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, new obstacles to overcome. But with Paul by her side, Tommy to inspire her, and the unwavering support of friends like Robert, she was ready to face whatever came next. Julie's life had become a testament to the power of kindness, perseverance, and second chances. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, her family safe and warm around her, she made a silent promise to herself to never forget where she came from, and to always be ready to offer others the same chance she'd been given, the chance to rewrite their own stories. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Now, how about another one? To watch another nice story, just click on the video appearing on your screen.